Hello, welcome to episode 60 of CRT Sound System. And we're talking about the Raidou Kuzunoha games this week. And I've got Reese with us as always. Reese, how are you?
Well, I've been better. Just like to take a second and apologize to all of the fans for the clicking in the previous episode.
Yes,
It
explain
is
yourself.
true. I was flying in circles in World of Warcraft. It was actually the clacking of my space bar. Not to be pedantic, but it's a clack, not a click. But I apologize to you, Tom. I apologize to the audience, and most importantly, I apologize to the guests, Pro Jared, Doctor Disrespect, John Hinckley. You deserve better than that. So, anyways, that got that out of my system. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm pretty good, yeah. And we've got a guest this week, Aiden. How are you?
I'm doing all right.
Pretty good. We're talking about the Raidou Kuzunoha games. So these are two games that were on the PS2, sort of in the Devil Summoner sub series. So Aiden, if you'd just like to do just a sort of a quick explainer of what these games are, what they're sort of about, just because I think they're kind of unique in the Shin Megami Tensei series.
The Raidou Kuzunoha games are part of the Devil Summoner series. I guess they're technically another spinoff.
Mm.
Which Devil Summoner? Oh God, there's a lot of like alternate timeline stuff going on in Shin Megami Tensei. But Raidou you have is part of this at the Devil Summoner stuff, and it's the same sort of timeline as those first Persona games. They take place. Well, the first one takes place, I think, in like the late 20s. You are part of a clan of devil summoners, special task to fight demons and whatnot. You get sent to a detective agency where you start working on just cases that may be of interest. First game kind of unfolds into some very strange places, especially for the time in which it's set. Rasputin is there. Trying to think. I'm gonna be honest. I don't remember a whole lot about the second game, other than it is a shift into the 30s, but the game very much wants you to forget about Japan in the 30s. It leans
Yeah.
very hard into the 20s still.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Yeah, because the Devil Summoners sort of sub series is a bit odd in and of itself, isn't it? Because it's like it's more connected, I think, than a lot of the other like the series and sub series. Like there's characters that come across in all of them, isn't there? And like the Kuzunoha clan is sort of a very a recurring. There's usually like whichever the current Raidou Kuzunoha is.
So are they connected just with each other or with the franchise as a whole?
I think just with each other, but you might be able
Okay.
uh, to give us a bit more information on that, Aiden.
The Devil Summoner series kind of leans more into the cyberpunk stuff that's going on in Shin Megami Tensei, Shin Megami Tensei 2. But a bit more, it's closer to modern day, where Shin Megami Tensei goes into like a post-apocalypse setting, and 2 takes place like 1,000 years later, or whatever. I don't remember the time gap. But well, so there are kind of connections all over the place, because especially the Kuzunoha characters will show up in Persona 1 and 2. They feature decently heavily as side characters. But I don't know. Do spoilers matter for talking about any of this stuff?
Not particularly. No, we're not.
Okay.
We're not very strong on spoilers here. So
The main villain of the first Raidou Kuzunoha game is Raidou Kuzunoha 40, the 40th. They have traveled back in time from roughly Shin Megami Tensei 2
okay.
to try to change the timeline, which while you defeat them, they do succeed enough, since instead of leading into Shin Megami Tensei, this leads into Shin Megami Tensei If, which leads into Persona 1, and then you have the Persona 2 nonsense reset stuff.
Okay, so they're actually more connected than even I thought before. Okay, that's quite interesting.
Yeah, they connect all over the place.
Yeah. And I suppose as far as gameplay goes, like these are both sort of the combat is very sort of like a Tales game, I would say. I wouldn't go as far as to call it a character action game, but it's like a sort of a third person action RPG, which is again quite unusual for the series, because most of these games are sort of turn based in some way, and unfortunately for that, they are sort of a bit janky. I haven't played a ton of either of them, but just having gone through like the tutorials and the first couple of missions with them, there's definitely a lot of jank to be found in these games.
So the first one, I think most people will tell you is a very bad game. It is, yeah, I can't think of another for a long while, like, real-time game that Alice puts out, especially like under Megami Tensei. So that first game is very, very bare bones of like you're kind of running around in a little combat encounter. You can summon a demon, which costs magnetite because it is old enough that they're still doing that. You have like a 3-hit sword combo. You can hold this sword attack button for a big slash, like Zelda.
Nodding.
You have a gun that's, I don't even remember how the gun really functions in that first game.
It's just more like it does like a stun.
Yeah.
It seems to be the main thing that it does, is to just sort of like juggle enemies to sort of stop them from doing attacks and stuff. It's not, yeah.
And with all
it's quite simple.
Yes, and with all Megami Tensei stuff, your character is not a caster. You have to rely on the demons to do spells and whatnot. So you kind of just have this not good melee combat system going on, and you have a weird support system for magic. You also have the first game did not have demon negotiation. You would shove demons into tubes. There's sort of like a mashing mini game for that.
That's okay. A Pokemon scenario. But
yeah.
But what if Pikachu didn't want to go into the orb, and you were pushing with all your might to get it in there? Okay, I get it.
That's very much what it is. He's just got these little tubes you'll see in like almost any key art. Like they look like just kind of like little vials. The second game is a huge step up in terms of gameplay. You have different sword combos. The gun has like functions. You can change your ammo type for different elements. There's unlimited bullets instead of having to scrounge for ammo. You can summon 2 demons at a time, and also it had demon negotiation, which was definitely a better system.
Yeah, and definitely more in line with the other games. Yeah.
Yeah, I when looking up stuff about this game, I would type it into the YouTube search bar, and there'd be like video essay channels called like Disappointment Nation and Too Rough to Play. That's just talking about the first one anyway. But looking at it, it seems like even if it was PS2 games with weird action but interesting, kind of odd mechanics. That's to me, that's PS2's bread and butter. So I think it's a bit unfairly maligned.
Yeah, it's definitely got there's a PS2 sort of vibe to this that is undeniable. As I say, the thing that it most reminds me of is like the Tales games, but like even stuff like Kingdom Hearts and other sort of action
the king
RPGs.
of bad gameplay, interesting other stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. It's like that's the sort of thing and that I do often associate with the PS2, even though like a lot of these I never saw these games. The first one came out in Europe and the second one didn't. It's surprised me how late these games came out in the sort of the life of the PS2. Like if you asked me when these games came out, I'd been like, oh, they were like they came out within a year of each other in like 2005 and 2006. But like the first game was a 2006 game, and then the second game came out in fucking 2008, which is like it's so late for the PS2. Like that's 2 years, 3 years into the Xbox 360's life that this game came out on the PS2, and like I think probably Persona 4 came out in the same year, I'm going to say, if not the year before. And like it's such an Atlas thing to have like these really really late releases on consoles.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's very Atlas.
I am such a big fan that you said 2 years after the Xbox 360 instead of 2 years after the PS3. That
Well, the Xbox 360 came out first, so that was like that's the first HD console. Like
well, yeah, just that the PS3 also came out in 2006. So
yeah.
I get what you're doing. It's just it feels like the perennial loser PS3 gets another dig. Is all I'm saying.
I was going to ask if it did, given the lack of games, but there is a connection here in that one of the launch titles was Folklore, which was, I believe, written by the Persona 2 writer, so we can run that back
Oh,
around.
was it? Okay, yeah. I remember being vaguely interested in that just because of the fact that it was based on sort of Irish folklore, specifically. And like a lot of things that sort of Japanese games love to draw from Irish folklore in a very sort of scattershot kind of way, but having something that sort of very specifically draws from it to like to try and sort of have it be sort of like a consistent world based around Irish folklore is very uncommon. But because it was a launch title on the PS3 and never sort of nothing else ever came of it, I never actually played it because I never had a PS3. But yeah, I think we'll jump into the first block of tracks anyway, just to get a bit more get a bit of more music under us. So all of the music in both of these games is done by Shoji Meguro, who we've talked about a lot in the past, and we'll probably bring him up again in the next block. But I just we'll jump into some music anyway, as I said. So the first track we have is called "The Lazy Detective Agency," and second track is A Strange World. Then we have Gold King House, Tokyo Metropolis, and finally Overcoming the Sadness. One thing that I do find quite interesting actually about this soundtrack that sort of just occurred to me while listening to it now is like, it's a very modern sounding soundtrack for a game that's set in like the 1920s. Like, you know, there's a lot of synths, and not just sort of like synthesized horns and stuff like that, but you know, everything like this, just that sort of what was the third track, the Gold King House. You know, there was a very sort of modern synth sound to that, and not dissimilar to stuff like that Meguro was doing in the Digital Devil Saga games, or even Persona 3, and as we mentioned as well during the break there, the last track, Overcoming the Sadness, has sort of some piano that's very reminiscent of Persona 3 in particular. Not a particularly deep insight, but just something that I did notice while we were listening there. One thing I do want to talk about though is just because you mentioned it and it's sort of is a bit funny, is just the fact that uh, what's his name? Gregory Rasputin is one of the villains of the game. Could you sort of elaborate on his whole deal in this game?
So he's shows up as sort of a like a Virgil type character where he's your rival summoner character. You first see him kind of like in shadow. You don't know who he is, but he's using summoner powers against you. And there is a point where the game takes place in the 20s, so there's a point of question in sort of the game is divided into cases, or well, it's divided into chapters at the very least, but a lot of them are, or at least early on, it's divided into cases. There's a point where one of the case notes is like, isn't Rasputin dead? Which obviously in pop culture, this is there's a whole thing about how he survives all these assassination attempts and goes off and does whatever in so many things. But instead, the reveal you get a bit earlier than I would have thought, looking back at it, is that there's just a straight up scene after you defeat him at one point where you see the hands twitch on the floor, and the camera pans over, and he's just a Terminator. He's got the Terminator face going on under with because part of his face is missing. Yeah.
It rips, actually.
And the glowing red eye and everything. Like, yeah.
It really does. And yeah, he was also sent back from the Shin Megami Tensei 2 era, I believe, is what occurred.
Yeah.
This is all super funny because honestly, like with a video game and a character like Rasputin, you can just be like, yeah, here's Rasputin. That's it. That's all you need. But they're just like, no, he's a Terminator. We're gonna make this make sense. It rips.
I feel like you saying that kind of opens. I should probably, because I don't know where else I'm gonna get into this. But so the plot of this game is absolutely wild. Where, yeah, it's very 1920s aesthetic, which also I'll say. You mentioned the soundtrack being very modern. I think that the original game's Raidou theme, at the very least, does have like it kind of brings that 20s feel to it, where the 2008 one you chose definitely has more of a, it has more synth going on, a bit more modern.
Yeah.
And the rest of the soundtrack, I do agree with you though. And I'm not even saying it's a full contradiction there. I'm just saying it does bring the 20s feeling pretty hard though. But you get to a point, and I don't remember exactly. Again, there's time travel stuff involved. There's also, of course, magic. We've got demons and so on. Where you're seeing, like, this is 1920s, so we do have what we think of today as, like, what a battleship looks like. But these are obviously, this is the era when we're starting to get those, like, modern battleships. And there's a point where this satellite in space projects a beam down to the ship that the main villain of the game up to this point, General, has, and the ship it becomes a full-on mech that is referred to as a soulless god throughout the rest of the game that just starts stomping around Tokyo.
That is incredible. I love that.
Yeah, it's a very interesting contrast to.
Yeah, I suppose, and then like that, it sort of it allows them to sort of sidestep the real world implications um, of having a character sort of be aligned with the Japanese sort of imperial project. um, yeah, that's wild. I love that. I really should maybe just. I don't think I'm going to finish playing this game because, like mentioned, the first game in particular is quite janky. But maybe it's worth getting myself a nice let's play on it for sure.
Yeah, Raidou 1 feels bad to play. But I will always defend it. It's absolutely worth kind of getting through, or at least I mean a let's play would definitely be a solution of just like it is really interesting what they decided to do with the directions they went with.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. It's one of those games that I've only ever sort of fully experienced the soundtrack of, and then I was like, well, I'm fine with sort of the way it is, but like what you've described does sound really really interesting. But yeah, and the whole thing of the soulless army, then like, are they what's the whole deal with them? So I suppose to explain to somebody, anyone who doesn't know, like the full title of the game is Raidou Kuzunoha versus the Soulless Army. So like, what is the Soulless Army in this context? Are they just like robots, or what's their whole deal?
So there is a general who has this whole project for how he's going to save Japan or bring Japan into the new era, this being the 20s, and he has a bunch of like these guys in like red armor, red capes, red like kind of gas mask looking things. Running around, and I think that they're kind of. It just turns out they're sort of like zombies as part of like he.
Oh, okay.
He is vaguely
That's a
connected
fairly
with...
literal interpretation of the phrase "soulless army," I suppose. So.
Yeah, they're more or less just zombies. I'm sure that there's a different word for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and he has all of these like weird military project stuff going on, and he has become like involved with like there's a god who's mad about something, and so that's where he's getting especially like the ability to get a mech out of the battleship from.
That's funny. The other thing I wanted to actually ask as well is sort of you've touched on it a little bit, is like the detective agency elements of it. So like why are you working for a detective agency rather than just sort of doing your own thing? Because like I remember doing the tutorial and going to the first mission and stuff, and you're just like you're assigned to go work for this guy Narumi, I think is his name. Yeah, Narumi Detective Agency. So like you're not even the main guy in this detective agency. It just seems like weird that you were just sent off to work with this guy, and then basically then you just sort of do your own thing anyway.
So Raidou's still, I think, like, because what he's wearing is a school uniform. He is a well, Raidou is also not the character's name, by the way. It is a title that you earn. I guess that's important to point out. Like he has just earned his mantle, but he is still I'm assuming around 18, whatever. Like, and so he is sort of being sent into like what should be a structured place to be able to start learning how to go about his work in terms of rooting out these sorts of things. And it also has a very sort of traditional like detective opening where it's like the first case you're sent on, you're hired, you meet this girl on a bridge at night, and she asks you to kill her, and then she gets picked up by the Soulless Army guys, these guys in red, like they run off into the fog, and it sparks this mystery of like, why did this young girl ask me to kill her? And the detective initially is like, oh, this is like some inheritance thing, and there's whatever going on, and you investigate that angle as things start to unfold into this bigger picture where you end up investigating military bases and Rasputin's there.
Yeah, no, because it's just I do think it's interesting to note the sort of detective agency stuff, because that does seem to be one of the sort of the common threads with all of the Devil Summoner games that I've played. So I've played the two Soul Hackers games. I've never played the original Devil Summoner. I'm not even sure if there's ever been an English port of it. But certainly for Soul Hackers and Soul Hackers 2, you're sort of your whole thing is that you work for a detective agency. So I do think that's kind of a sort of an interesting thematic element that sort of repeats through these games. So I just sort of wanted to bring that up to see if there was anything going on there. So yeah, it sounds kind of interesting that way. Then, like, it sort of gives you the player as a way into the world. I suppose it gives you that that way to sort of learn about things without having people to just exposit stuff at you constantly.
So, I mean, it is this sort of is like the traditional profession, I guess. And again, it makes sense as a way to, like, your job is to go investigate paranormal stuff. So being a detective agency, people are going to come to you with, here's the whatever's going on, and that's how you're going to find your way in. Because this is persistent. I don't remember. Are you part of a detective agency in Soul Hackers? I know you're part of like a hacker group. I didn't remember if you were.
You do, yeah. It's sort of like, you do sort of, yeah. You're getting into you're into Spooky's hacker group, I think is the name of it. Yeah. Or maybe it's another character that's in. No, it's actually there's a different character. It's not your main character, but like one of the other characters is like a detective that you're sort of working with or sort of alongside. And then, like, Soul Hackers 2, sort of again, it's the same. You were part of a hacker group, but then you sort of go off on your own to be like sort of a freelancer. And part of that is sort of setting up this sort of this agency. I suppose you wouldn't necessarily call it detective, but it's styled as such, even if it's not strictly that.
Yeah. And even with I mentioned like Persona 2, there is a Kuzunoha who is they're not part of the party or anything, but they're a major side character, and it is in Persona 2 you are you're high school students, because of course you are, which is not true for the second one, but you are investigating, like, there's weird stuff going on, why is this happening, and you do go seek help from a detective agency where the current Kuzunoha is working. So, like, it is something that it is pretty consistent throughout time. That's how you'll find them.
Yeah, oh, that's fair enough. No, we'll jump into some more of the music. So I think these are primarily battle themes. So yeah, we have the first track is Go Raidou, then we have Formidable Foe, The Fated Showdown, An Old Foe, and Shock the Final Battle. to go back to the Digital Devil Saga episode, and I think I mentioned it previously as well, but we in that episode I was fucking singing the praises of the guitar playing, and I didn't know at the time who was actually playing the guitar, but to find out that it is actually Shoji Meguro makes a lot of sense, and across pretty much all of those tracks there, his guitar playing is just absolutely fucking incredible. I love to hear him play, especially when like he finds a nice groove to just sort of work into with the guitar. You can really just fucking feel him. It's really like just there's a sort of a soulfulness to his guitar playing, even though it's you know just shredding over video game music.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it's real
it's
good.
immaculately mixed, right? With like just the right amount of sort of like finger noises in some parts. I was gonna mention the guitar playing as well. Probably, with less articulation, but man, I was fucking in a reverie listening to those battle tracks because they bang really hard. It makes me want to play the game. Even though I know I probably wouldn't stick with it. Just because it's just like, I don't know. I am not one to really let a terrible combat stand in the way of me enjoying a game. That's why I got so far in The Witcher 3.
Yeah.
And it's really compelling to me how strong it is, and I'm not going to say that it sounds samey, but there is certainly like a that's why it had the month, right? There is a vibe to all this music, even if it dips into different genres. It feels different and it feels compelling in unique ways to the other games that we have discussed, and
Yeah.
the franchise that shall not be named.
Yeah, no, it's true, and it's like, yeah, Meguro is sort of, we mentioned it in the last episode that like he became the sort of Atlas's guy at a certain point, and he really sort of defined the sort of house style for games at this particular time. And like not just in the Shin Megami Tensei series, but the Mach and X soundtrack as well has sort of got a lot of this similar sounds in terms of guitars and synths and everything going on in it. And he was just it's really hard to fault what he was doing at this point in time. Like he was really just sort of in a really good sort of space. I feel like with all of the stuff that he was doing. We've mentioned we've had previous episodes of Persona 3 and Digital Devil Saga, but like his remakes of the Persona 1 and 2 soundtracks, while some people are sort of quite they really want those original soundtracks, I do think the remakes for the PSP have some really, really good music to them as well. Well worth tracking down if you're into this kind of stuff.
I was going to say, and Reese had mentioned there being an idea of a sameness with some of the across some of the series. I feel like that Meguro was really just knocking it out of the park for the entire PS2 era, and even I think it was the Forced Battle track. There's a section in there that sounds like it could just be part of a track out of Shin Megami Tensei 3, but like. I do feel like between like Digital Devil Saga, Shin Megami Tensei 3, this like Persona 3 and 4, they all have their own distinct personality.
Certainly.
Once you get into sort of like some of the rhythms, it's like, oh, this is very similar to that one over there, but they do all stand out from each other in a certain flavor, but they also they do get there, but not in a way that I think is bad in any way. I think that especially because they're all pretty killer tracks.
It's all sort of like the part of the sonic identity of the game, and especially in the last track as well, the final battle, you get that sort of that Raidou Kuzunoha motif coming through again. you know, and like that. We talk about it a lot on the show, just for like a good use of a motif like that in the final battle theme in particular can be such a sort of an energizing moment, you know, like those where you're like, it's a, you know, a shonen moment, let's say, you know, where like, oh shit, here comes my team, now I'm gonna fucking beat the shit out of the boss.
I mean,
You
motifs
know,
exist for a reason. They
yeah,
work.
absolutely,
Yeah.
it's always
I
fun
will,
though.
I will say too, for the PS2 era, it is just an interesting place for Atlas in general. Like they are very much experimenting with like, how do we even do any of this going forward? Like you get Digital Devil Saga as, we made this combat for Shin Megami Tensei 3, but we want to simplify a bit. We're going to get rid of the whole like demon system stuff. We're just moving over to like I think it's Final Fantasy X has a similar, it's like the level up grid or whatever. Like it has that going for it instead of demon recruitment, but it has the same combat as 3, so it's trying to get people in that way. Persona 3 obviously has the ways that it's trying to reach out to a new audience. Like, you know, they all also have a very similar core. They're all very made at the same time, and I think the soundtracks are just sort of an interesting reflection of that, where you're seeing some like you're seeing the composer also just go through those motions of trying to figure out how do I give this its own flavor? How do I give this its own flavor? But I'm still doing that same core.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's cool too. I mean we've touched on it before, but I think this sort of like this is an example of how artists can thrive when they have sort of like you know, a comfortable environment to just like let things unspool. You know, like I feel like if uh Shoji Meguro and you know, other comparable composers of the SMT series, you know, had less you know, job security, you know, they probably wouldn't have had the opportunity to just like sit and like really fine tune these kind of bangers, because I just feel like, you know, like I listen to every one of these and I feel like you can see a version of this song that's less polished and maybe less compelling and does feel a bit more samey, but I feel like Shoji especially cannot put out a track that is not absolutely you know, polished to a T and fucking bangs really hard and feels special. And I don't know, that's just sort of like, you know, from the leftist end of things, from the leftist artist end of things, it's sort of like, you know, it's one of many exhibit A's.
Yeah. And I think it's something he's mentioned in like interviews and stuff as well, where like he was given the freedom to sort of to explore sonic sort of areas that he hadn't been given previously, with like the Digital Devil Saga games and with this, that like you know, that he was able to sort of experiment with sounds and experiment with stuff that sort of you wouldn't have previously really heard in video games. And you know, we would talk about sort of the different sounds of Persona 3, 4, and 5, but like you don't get that without that sort of freedom to explore. And you know, for better or for worse, I have my issues with the Persona 4 soundtrack that I've mentioned before, but like, you know, it has its shooters also, and rightfully so. There's a lot of really interesting stuff going on there.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just it's good when people are who are creative are allowed to be creative in their own space.
10,000%.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we can talk a little bit more about the second game. So we sort of discussed it a little bit at the start, but now that we're sort of going into the music of the second game, we can maybe go into it in a little bit more detail. So it takes place like 10 years later. Is that my understanding? Because it seems like there's a bit of a time skip at the start of it, but it wasn't really clear from what I was from the bit that I played at the very start. If you said you're less familiar with this one, Aiden, is that right?
Yeah, I'm fairly certain I played these games at a point in my life that a lot of is kind of missing currently.
Yeah.
But I don't think I do not think that I finished the second game. Now I don't. There is some time has passed. I don't believe it's necessarily been a decade, but we have shifted to the 30s. Though the game again, it while it tells you that it has shifted to the 30s, the aesthetics and a lot of the choices of it tries to just stick back in the 20s. Again, I think that they don't want you you don't want to be thinking about what Japan
Don't think
is
too
doing.
hard about when this is taking place.
Yeah. And the gameplay, as said, has also just been kind of very much updated. You have a lot more depth going into the combat. You have a lot better choices involved. It's still not I think the game that people would be excited to play generally, but it's a game that I will be way more defensive about in terms of no, it's absolutely playable, and I was enjoying it. I just life gets in the way sometimes. I do need to get back to that. I didn't mention at the time though that it one of the combat upgrades is you do get a dodge roll, so it is officially a Souls game.
Excellent.
But does it give you iframes? I think that's the real litmus test for it. I think if it has iframes, it's a Souls game. If not, it's just sparkling action RPG.
It's Dragon's Dogma.
All right. Well, I need to find out if the jumping around with the gun pulled out at Silent Hill 4, The Room, gives you any iframes at any point, so I can claim that as a Souls-like, and then get beaten to death in the street.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
Also, just an interesting note for the second Raidou game is that when it came out in Japan, it actually it came with a copy of Shin Megami Tensei 3, which this was the third version of that game. There was an original release, and then there was a second version called the Maniacs Edition, which added most of the content that anybody who has any vague awareness of that game has seen.
That's sort of what we got here in the West.
Yes,
isn't it?
we didn't get the first version. We got the Maniacs Edition, which added all of the fun skeleton characters and added Dante.
Yeah.
And
the famous featuring Dante from Devil May Cry sticker.
Yep.
And then you said that he was removed then for a later version and then replaced with Raidou.
Yes, that's the version that came with this, which is the Chronicles version, where they just replaced Dante. They didn't replace the battle theme, so it still has. I mean, that Dante theme is killer, but
it's great. Yeah.
So it's a little strange, but also there's a very nice change in that, like, for anybody who's played through Maniacs, Dante kind of sucks, unfortunately. Once you finally get him as a party member, he's not very useful.
Okay.
And they made Raidou a lot better, so that you had a reason to use him.
Yeah. And I think we mentioned as well, like if you play the HD version that was re-released a couple of years ago, both characters are available as DLC. So does that mean that you can play both in the same playthrough, or do you sort of have to choose one?
No, you have to choose which one.
I quite like Dante, as I think most people do, but I'm not willing to pay for it. So
it is also that's the DMC2 Dante, which a lot of people do like as a design. It's one of the only things people.
That's a really good design, in fairness. For all the problems with DMC2.
I'm gonna say something controversial and totally off track, but I like all of the Devil May Cries. I don't know. I'm in there and I'm just like, we're jumping, we're shooting, we're getting goofy with it. That's all I need. I like the very stupid DMC reimagining. Yeah. It so long as a devil might cry at any time. I'm into it. Sorry. Anyways.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with you really. 2 is still probably the worst of them, but like that means it's more of a 7 out of 10 rather than the rest, which are sort of 8s and 9s.
Yeah.
Which fine with me.
I think that's a wild take, but sure.
I mean, my personal top is 3, I think, but
Oh sure, I'm not gonna fight anybody over their video game opinions. I just 2 is
No,
so
we'll-
miserable to play.
it has been forever since I've played 2, so you know, I we'll have to go back into the gamer dome, ignore our loved ones for months on end to create the definitive list.
No, when they did the HD collection, I played through 1 and 2 and 3, sort of one after the other. And I definitely found that I didn't hate 2 as much as I did when I first played it when it first came out. So I definitely softened on it over the years, but it is by far the worst of the main Devil May Cry games. But yeah, with that Devil May Cry talk over, I think we'll jump into some music from the second game. So this one is called Raidou Kuzunoha versus King Abaddon is the full title of that. I really enjoy the how long these titles are. It's a very fun little. I don't know if you want to call it a joke, but it is very funny to me regardless.
Like
Especially once you start including all the sub-series and the colons, because like you've got like Shin Megami Tensei : Devil Summoner : Raidou Kuzunoha versus the Soulless Army. Like that is a long title. But yeah, so the first track we have from the second game is Everyday Detective Agency. Then we have The Family of Tsukigata. Then Determination, and lastly is Tsukudo-Cho 2008. that horn synth really just comes up a lot in this era. It's not bad, but it's certainly a horn synth. It's a really distinctive sound, and like you hear it across a lot of different Shin Megami Tensei soundtracks at this time.
I'm 100% that Yoda meme that's just like enjoying horn synth at 3 a.m. 2 minutes later, going back to the refrigerator to enjoy more horn synth.
I just love that, like, you have a point in the track where the brass section is kicking in. It's like, oh, we're trying to evoke the time period a little bit, but then there's just this really funky bass line going. It's like, no, no, we're
just
not.
the funky bass and some electric piano and like,
It's like,
yeah, it's good, and like the soundtrack is very much sort of a continuation of it, and like I mentioned at the start, like if you'd asked me, I would have said that these games came out like back to back, that they were very close releases, and one of the reasons I think that is just because the continuity of sound between the two soundtracks is so strong. Like there's he's got different versions of tracks from the first game in this, in particular the very first track we played, which is from this one, but is a rearrangement of the same theme from the first game. But like if you just played these soundtracks back to back, I don't think you'd ever really sort of think that they were from different games at all.
Yeah,
and it really sort of stands to Meguro's sort of craft here, that he was able to just even like 2 years apart, to sort of evoke very similar sounds and all that through this.
it is very much a direct sequel, and as it should be. Much like, I mean, if you look at the Digital Devil Saga games, those are also like those are kind of one game just split into two. And so, yeah, you just keep the same flavor and just keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. From what I understand, anyways.
Yeah.
I'd like to shift gears briefly before we hit the last kind of outro segment. Maybe talk a little bit about my experience with these games. Kind of just looking at them in the soundtracks. And specifically the part that always kind of like really I find I haven't found the way to articulate it, but until recently. But something I really love about these games is in the summoning of demons, it just roots through every single world religion almost equally, to present them as horrible demons that at best are inhuman avatars of human cells. Specifically, like the Old Testament Christian stuff, especially. The fact that like Yahweh, Adam, Eve, there's like an item where you can get Moses' sandals, stuff like that. Is they're just all fodder for this, and we're just all like humans cringing in the face of these terrible creatures, which is sort of true in the original dog shit story it's drawing from, but I think it's so much better and funnier in the game that you're just like, man, you know who will destroy you? It's Adam of Adam and Eve. That creature hates. Well, it's like it's so far beyond us. It's not something that we can reckon with, except to summon and control, for so we can date our high school math teacher or whatever. And I don't know. I don't have any particular thoughtful statements on all of that. I just wanted to mention that even if I haven't, it's tough for me to go through one of these games to completion. I love the vibe so much. And I could almost I would love to just have some like terrible randomizer where like you put them all into a big jumble and you are playing, and like each hour you kind of like move on to a different game, different things, because they're not similar in mechanics or anything, but you are always uh summoning a digital devil.
Yeah.
um that and I love that for them and all of us, just because you don't get that in any other game. You don't get, you're not you're sometimes you'll fight like like sort of Adam and Eve type figures, but they're never just like, this is literally Yahweh,
Yeah.
and he will kill all of us if we don't behave. It's so many other games shy away from that. Like literally, like Jesus Christ is a persona. Like like, so did no other game dares. Like I
And
wish I wish Smite
it's
would
an
dare.
achievement in Persona 3 Reload to make a demon fusion that is the Messiah. Like,
So I love it.
yeah, no, it is something that, like, yeah, the common elements throughout the whole series are sort of are definitely something that I think sort of keep people interested in it. Whether it's the demons or like sort of some sort of cross pollinated mechanics, like you mentioned, Aiden, how like the press turn system in Nocturne was then sort of like adapted to use in Digital Devil Saga, to sort of make it a little bit more friendly to new players, or to people who weren't sort of really into RPG mechanics, um, and like that kind of stuff, where they sort of make these little sub series to do little experiments for. Whether it's like sort of weird different types of stories or mechanical stuff. It's really good, and it's sort of what makes the Shin Megami Tensei series or the Megami Tensei stuff sort of so fascinating, because it's just so sprawling, and so much of it sort of is drawing from the same well, and like that, it all comes from one pretty shitty short story. From like, yeah, we mentioned that in the previous episode, I think, as well, that you've read that, and it sounds like a real slog.
Yeah, can I mention something? Can I talk about the mythology angle for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so with what Reese was talking about, I mean, that really is a huge part of the draw of any of these to me. I as a child was just like, I was constantly reading like mythology from any culture that I could get my hands on, getting into just like all these stories and so all of that is somewhere buried in the back of my brain, and so it gets like that gets lit up whenever any of the stuff is showing up. But I absolutely love the way that the games will approach a lot of these things, and especially having to I've lost the word, but having to deal with the fact that you're in a world where Odin is standing over there and Baal is standing over there, and like, what does that mean? How does this work? We have to reconcile this, and they do really fun things about that, especially if you're aware of not just the actual myths, but if you're aware of sort of the history of the way that certain religions have spread and how they took over, where they took over. Like in the first Shin Megami Tensei, one of the late game bosses is an Asura, from Hindu mythology. So Asura's in Hindu mythology, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of this wrong because it's been a very long time since I've read into this, but they're sort of viewed as like a more negative spirit, versus where the Devas are considered the more kind of positive aspects. When you defeat that Asura, because this is a game and we're playing loose with the rules a bit, that's not an Asura, that is Asura, and so you kind of get the deal with you get his deal after you beat him, and it's that he is on a quest to go fight Yahweh because he used to be Asura Mazda. Very different religion, and also like a very holy figure versus sort of a more demonic entity. But because the way that Christianity spread and overtook that region, and sort of the way that it co-opted and changed lots of deities into demons in their lore. You're seeing consequences of that as character motivations.
Yeah,
and I find that so fascinating.
That is interesting. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned earlier in the podcast, you were looking into this, and and Russian Terminator, Rasputin Terminator got you into a rabbit hole about the, Russian-Japanese war. It's all of these separate things. Like whenever I'm looking stuff up, I'm absolutely kind of on a mini rabbit hole where I'm just like, oh, this deity is in the game. Like let's read a little bit about Shintoism or something. It's fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's something as well. Just now that you mention it, there was something I was reading earlier. How about like even within in the series, like the fact that that there are sort of Western deities and sort of non-Asian deities that can be summoned. Has to do with like the introduction of those religions and those sort of cultures to Japan after they sort of opened up, and that like previously like the summoners and stuff like that in the series would only have ever summoned like Japanese demons and things from like Shinto and stuff like that, which I think is a really interesting sort of lore sort of tidbit. That sort of ties that all together a little bit.
Yeah. As a final note, I was going to mention too, just the very fun, again, to go with what a lot of Reese was talking about, and sort of the use of these as characters, is that as far as the mainline games go, I would almost never recommend going for a law ending because I'm not a cop. But Shin Megami Tensei 2 very famously has what is easily the best law ending because it involves teaming up with Satan, who is differentiated from Lucifer. Satan is the judge, and I mean there's a whole lot of discussion to be had with if you actually go look into. Anyway, I'm going to try to avoid that. But you side with Satan, and the final boss of that game is Yahweh, no matter which path you end up going down. But so you are taking a route where you are siding with this. You're siding with judgment, and judgment by Old Testament law against Yahweh as being a tyrant and destroying him for not following his own rules essentially.
Very funny.
And that ending rules.
Which has you could say that even the Bible sort of like does have those kind of underpinnings because Yahweh in the Old Testament is a jealous figure, why wouldn't they have an epic cyber beef 2,000 years later?
Yeah, don't you're gonna get me started talking about Gnosticism, and we're gonna be here for another 2 hours.
I was just gonna say we're sort of veering towards Gnosticism now.
sorry.
No, I love it, but it's not what
it'll derail the entire podcast.
Yeah, this isn't the right place.
All right, so yeah, we'll jump into the last block of tracks anyway because I don't want to keep you too much longer, Aiden. So again, more sort of battle themes. So we have New Battle, Decisive Battle, Battle Raidou 2008, Demon Battle, and Final Decisive Battle. Shoji Meguro knows his way around a battle theme. And I think sort of, whether it's these games or Digital Devil Saga, I think those are sort of always end up being the highlights for me personally. He can just really get you pumped up.
I'd forward Nocturne as well. Like those battle themes, those like the town versions of the battle theme. I don't know, they're all killer. That forced battle theme is also always just a treat.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we don't have much else to talk about really. So I just want to say thank you, Aiden. We've been sort of going back and forth trying to get you on for a while, so I'm glad to finally have you on the pod. We'll definitely have to have you back at some point to talk about some fighting game music, because I know that's something we've sort of both discussed a lot in the past. So it's definitely going to be something for us to talk about in future.
Always love having pals on. Also. Yeah. And now that we've broken the seal, we can badger you to appear on episodes for the rest of all of our lives, however long or short that might be.
Well, thank you for having me. I would love to talk fighting game music and stuff, and thank you for truly having infinite patience with it's been a time, and trying to get in here was a bit. It's been
No, of course, and it was worth the wait. You were a wonderful guest. Always love to have guests like very knowledgeable, not only about the games but things that, unlike me, I have no knowledge. I don't have like a terribly broad game knowledge, and I know nothing about the world around me. So whenever anybody has any idea what other countries are named or what happened in history before 2016, I'm always super impressed.
Absolutely, and yeah, it's been a fun month with all the Megami Tensei soundtracks we've done. I think we sort of showed a good spread of what's going on with this series, and sort of how many different little avenues and nooks and crannies you can go down with any given sort of series or sub-series in it, whether it's musically or whether thematically or whatever, and again how it all just sort of ties back together into this sort of greater mythology is very fun. So we're back to normal after this anyway, but I'll have to look into what we're going to do for a month next year, possibly Final Fantasy 14.
Goodness!
If I'm feeling truly insane.
Oh yeah, that's definitely would take a month to properly dip a single toe into. So that makes sense.
I just wanted to say I appreciate the spread of the Megami Tensei stuff, because there is so much to go into, and even in the main numbered games, there's a bunch to go into with very different bits of music, very different styles of stuff. It's a very large series.
Yeah, absolutely.
So do you have anything you want to plug, Aiden, or if you want to let people know where they can find you online, if you want them to find you online?
I've got nothing to plug, and I also you know what, I have one thing to plug, which is friend of this pod, Zed. Go help Zed out. I'm sure that Reese can put links for that.
Yeah, absolutely. We love Zed, friend of the show, friend of the extended podcast network. We will include a link to their Ko-Fi, I believe is the thing, and help them out. They're a wonderful animator and just a big-hearted goof who's one of my favorites.
Yeah, I really like their episode of Existential Warfare. That was a good fun listen. And speaking of Existential Warfare, Reese, what have you got to plug?
Well, I'm not going to bring up Existential Warfare because I still have that episode to edit. And I don't know. I'm just addled. I don't know. Okay, we can't get into that. Vigatuito, video games are the worst thing on earth. We are mentally ill about politics. Spun off from the Chapo Trap House Discord so many years ago. And and this podcast, CRT Sound System. Listen to that.
Yeah, as for ourselves, we can be found on Patreon at CRT Sound System, mostly on Blue Sky now, CRT Sound System on there. I've more or less just sort of parked the Twitter account, and will occasionally just do a shit post, but that's about it, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant to be on social media, but
No.
Twitter is really every 8 months it becomes like we descend a deeper circle into hell. And the usernames of the people in my replies, I cannot even utter to another person without feeling like I'm going to be arrested. It's getting dire.
Yeah, and for one thing I should mention actually, so with the Patreon I've mentioned before, we you can get the higher bit rate downloads, and the bonus episodes are all up there. They're not on the main Spotify feed, but what I've discovered is that if you search for our Patreon feed, um, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. The CRT Sound System Patreon feed is just what it's called. You can actually access all of the bonus episodes through that without having to be a patron member or anything. You can just listen to them; they're public. So I know it's a bit of a rigmarole to go into Patreon and to download the tracks there, or download the bonus episodes there. But if you do want to listen to those bonus episodes and you're not a patron, you can just go into to the Spotify for the Patreon feed, which is a separate feed to the main feed. Annoyingly, I can't merge them, but it would be nice if I could. But as I say, you can listen to those episodes for free. And if you are a patron as well, you can access the feed that way as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And you should.
but yeah, we
'Cause
should.
we command. I command. Tom's too nice.
Yeah, listen to Reese. Reese knows what's going on. So with the other thing is we have our Discord. Come hang out in the Discord. Talk about video game music with us. Talk about whatever the hell you want with us. It's small but reasonably active, and pretty much everyone in there is cool and chill. And if you want to come on the show, let us know. Send me a DM, send Reese a DM. I'm doing a lot of planning at the moment for sort of stuff that's coming up in the new year. So now it's probably a really good opportunity for you to be to slide into my DMs and be like,
Yeah.
let's do the Undertale episode.
Yeah, DM me, Reese V Rider, on the things. Tom gets all the DMs. I want one person to be like, we need to review the soundtrack of Pussy Out Resident Evil on itch.io. It's a banger.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to let you go, Aiden. Thanks so much for joining us. Last track is just the ending theme from Raidou Kuzunoha versus the Soulless Army. Thank you, Reese. Thank you, Aiden. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And
Thank
have
you,
a good
thank
one.
you, Tom. Thank you most of all.
You're welcome. Good night.